Good afternoon. I'm here with my guests this afternoon, Lee Varon and Marc Goldfinger, both editors of this new anthology put out by the Ibbotson Street Press, Spare Change News Poems. And if you don't know about Spare Change, it's probably the oldest street newspaper there is. You know, you can see the vendors in Harvard Square and all over Boston selling this paper. And Marc Goldfinger here, who has been with the paper, since its inception, I believe.
No,
not
since
quite.
1993.
Yeah, okay. And he's been the poetry editor and a columnist there, and I've interviewed him over the years and actually worked with him at Spare Change a bit. And Lee Varon, who's been in social services, she's a licensed social worker and therapist, certainly understands the streets and, excuse me for a minute. She certainly understands the streets and she's put together with Marc this great anthology of poetry and things of that nature. So I was going to start off the questions by asking you, you've been a social worker for many years, and Marc's been the poetry editor of Spare Change. How did this all come together?
So I used to buy Spare Change, and I would always read the poetry in it, and I always enjoyed it a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I broached the subject with Marc because I saw that he was the poetry editor, and I said, what about the idea of putting together an anthology? Because, you know, you buy a newspaper and you throw out the newspaper and you never see the poem again. And I thought, wow, some of these poems are really good. I'd really like to collect them in some sort of anthology or something. And at first Marc was, yeah, maybe, we'll see. But I was persistent, and Marc said yes. And we didn't know what we were getting into, so
I was overwhelmed at first with the idea because I knew what we were getting
into. And I
into.
didn't know. Because what happened was because I was working, and I would go to Marc's on Sundays, and he would have to go up into his attic where he had piles and piles and piles of the newspaper, and we would have to go through all of the newspapers searching for the poems that we were going to put in. And it was a hard decision sometimes. But
It was very hard
down.
because there was many poems that we left out that are just as good as the ones that are in the book.
Now, I was going to ask you, give me a brief history of Spare Change, Marc.
Spare Change it was put together by a group of homeless people and one coordinator, Tim Harris. Its first issue came out in May of 1992, and the paper used to come out once a month, and then I started selling the paper as a homeless heroin addict in March of 1993, and then
I remember we had this great interview in a now defunct magazine, The New Renaissance, where we were in the Harvard Poetry Room, and I was interviewing over a few days actually.
Yeah, it was a big interview.
Yeah, so. And actually, homeless people can make a living selling this. Some do.
They can, if you're dedicated. When I sold the paper, I used to work Monday through Saturday from 7 in the morning until 5:30 at night, and
I remember you on the streets. I saw your books too.
And I used to sell my books on the street too, and people knew me. And it was a regular, I did very well financially, better than most people would think.
Well, I mean, you had a home in Marblehead, I know.
No. Well, unfortunately, I didn't always make wise decisions with my money.
Right.
But, I was editor of the paper for a while.
And I remember I worked also with Linda Larson, who's in this anthology.
And she was the
a great
editor.
poet.
She was
the late Cindy Varon.
Yes,
So
yes.
So-
She was a great editor, too.
She was.
Yeah.
She was very encouraging to me. This
Yeah.
was my first gig writing for a newspaper,
Yeah.
and she was always. Both of them were just.
I loved
instrumental.
working with Linda and
Yeah.
Cindy.
So, you've got big names like Marge Piercy and Martin
Yeah.
Espada. You contributed
Yeah.
this, as well as homeless poets and
Right.
other writers. I mean, what was the vetting process like?
Well, one of the things I really liked about the paper and the selection that Mark had, because I wasn't a part of that at all,
Right.
he was the editor, is that I had worked at Sojourner, the women's newspaper,
Yes.
in the 70s, yeah, and one of the things with that paper, also, we had some really well-known people, like Denise Levertov, Adrian Rich.
Who was a Somerville resident? We're in
Yes,
Somerville.
for a while, she
Yes.
was, yeah. And wonderful poets, and then people, I always remember when I was a poetry editor, this 16-year-old young woman from Chicago, she'd never submitted to a magazine before, and we published her, Alicia Cotton, I remember her name still.
Is she
So-
a poet now?
I don't know, but the thing, that's what I liked was the mix, and that's what I liked about, what Mark was doing,
Mhm.
was that there was this mix of people like Marge Piercy and really well-known people, so we wanted to include some of those people, obviously, but
And then what poems and the other poems? I mean,
In terms
how
of
many
how did we
homeless
decide?
people wrote in this edition, you think?
Well, Mark knows that better than me, because I don't really know who's homeless and who isn't.
Yeah,
I
that would
just
be
know
hard
the
to
poems.
determine, yeah.
I'd say probably half the people in here were homeless at one time.
point, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, and the proceeds, until you make up
Yes.
for the cost of the book, then the
Right.
proceeds, I
Would
don't know
go-
if that, you've reached
Yes.
that point yet.
No, I
but
haven't
then-
reached that point
But then the
yet.
proceeds will be going to the Spare
To,
Change, or?
Yeah.
They'll be going to the Homeless Empowerment Project.
Which is Spare
Right,
Change.
which
is
is
like
spare
the
change.
umbrella.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
umbrella,
Spare
spare
Yes.
change.
Now, I remember very fondly, I introduced Spare Change to this guy, Ed Gehling. and
Oh,
Joseph-
yeah.
and
He's-
and Joseph Cohen.
Yeah, he's in the book.
Yeah,
He's in the book.
yeah.
He was a character, wasn't
Yeah.
he?
Yes,
Okay,
yeah.
maybe you can talk about him.
Well, I mean, there are some people in the book, like Joe Cohen, for example, I mean, that were encouraging and supportive, but weren't.
Joe was 100 when he died.
Yeah, I
He's still
know, I
writing.
know, but I
Yeah.
mean, they weren't homeless, they didn't have any real connection that way.
No, but he
So-
was, he knew another world.
Yeah.
He was
Ed
a,
Gehling?
yeah, Ed Gehling.
Yeah.
He was a soldier, I think, in World
War
War
II.
One.
World War II.
Was it World War II? Because
Yeah.
he died when he was about
96.
95, 96.
Yeah, I used to speak with him all the time.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah,
would
he used
write,
to
he'd do cartoons
Call me
also. for
too.
the-
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So
We miss him. Actually,
Yeah.
he was the subject, well, one of the subjects in a New Yorker article a few years ago, because this
Oh.
children illustrator picked his poems.
No
picked his
kidding.
poems for the book.
Really?
It was child,
Huh.
children's poems. Yeah.
Huh.
And just amusingly, Paul Stephen Stone wrote a poem about you and me, and
I know,
sort
that
of a
was.
poetic.
I know
poetic
Paul,
fight.
so I had to include
Yeah,
that. There were
yeah.
a few things I thought, well, obviously Mark knows him too, but I said, oh, can we, I'd like to include these
Yeah.
people because we know
I didn't know
them.
we were in a battle. I guess that's how it was advertised, as a battle of poets or something like
Yeah.
that. You probably
Yeah.
won.
yeah, right. Yeah.
No, in a sense, in a big sense, this is political poetry, but it is
Yeah.
not rant-like or, that rant-like, that's the peril of political poetry.
Right.
Maybe you could talk to that. I mean, is that a real danger, when you're writing political poetry?
I don't know. If it's a rant, it's more of a slam poem
Mm-hmm.
than like regular poetry. Like a lot of poems that people like. Not to put down slam poetry, but a lot of slam poetry doesn't stand up on the page.
On the page, right.
Yeah, if you look
Yeah.
at it's all performance.
Right. I mean,
and
some of that
that's
really political poetry can be very effective when it's, when it's performed.
right.
Right.
But
But then on the page, like Mark's saying, it just kind of is very flat.
Yeah.
And preachy and sort of
unless
bombastic.
you're
So
like
you look for that, you look.
Yeah.
We were looking for poems that were really poems,
yeah,
that were
unless
really
Patricia
aesthetically-
Smith.
Is she in here?
No.
No.
But she used.
got her.
I've written. We've published a few of her poems. I don't think we ran across it.
No, we didn't.
You know, I remember she was at the Cambridge Poetry Festival years ago.
Yeah, yeah,
Now she
she-
teaches at Staten Island.
She used to run the slam at the Cantab
Cantab,
Lounge.
With
Yeah.
Michael Brown, who I interviewed on the show
Uh-huh.
years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're up in Maine now, I think. No, not Patricia. Patricia, they got divorced. Patricia's in Staten Island. Mark's up in Maine. But both of you had poems in there, both
Yeah.
really great poems, and I especially like your use of colors. You know, again,
You're right.
Having trouble with that mic. Just won't behave.
won't behave. I don't know.
It's like sometimes the words don't behave when I'm writing a story.
That's right.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, you use colors to really
Yeah.
vividly describe the tragedy of this beautiful young.
Oh, it was so very sad.
And you
Yeah.
are, you know, watching these young heroin addicts on the street, you know, it's particularly poignant when people are that young and they're and they're
Absolutely.
dying.
Yeah.
Maybe you could speak to
Mm.
one of you guys can speak to that.
Well, we were talking about that, actually,
Mhm.
before we came here, we were over at Dunkin' Donuts. I mean, how tragic it is that like over
You know what's
60
odd about Dunkin' Donuts? There's a lot of heroin addicts hang out there. Why is
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
I don't know. I guess the
Well, it's a
coffee's
place where they
cheaper,
won't
you
be
know?
found.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So,
You know,
But go ahead.
but over 60,000 people died of, you know, some form of overdose in last year, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not the same as, like, I was a heroin addict since the 60s, but if the heroin was like it is today, like, I don't think I'd be alive.
Yeah, because we were
because it's
talking
just-
about a lot of the heroin now it's not even
It's
heroin.
not really
fentanyl, or
heroin.
It's you know, carfentanil is being
Elephant tranquilizer, yeah.
adulterated with other substances, and
And,
so.
and Mark was telling us before the show how he went into Harlem projects and did all this crazy stuff
Right.
just to secure heroin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And you
I-
were in prison for a while for that, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
I did about 3 years in prison.
Yeah.
So,
And you wrote about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I wrote about that.
Right.
And I've written about it in short stories and a couple of poems, but mostly short stories,
Mhm.
the prison. The Jeff Robinson Trio wrote, I wrote the words for Getting Fixed in South Carolina, and they put it to music, and they perform it. It came out in a CD.
Yeah, Jeff
It's gonna-
has been a fixture at the Lizard Lounge for many years
right.
now. And
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember I did an interview with him for Spare Change, actually,
Yeah.
an all poetry issue.
It's
Is
going
he
to
still
be.
at the Lizard Lounge?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
such a late open mic, though. That's why I
Yeah.
never go there.
No,
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
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 Unless you're the feature
Yeah,
or a
exactly.
slammer.
Yeah.
It's,
Now, Lee, both of you
Yeah.
are poets and writers in your own right. You've
Right.
written, you had a new collection out.
I have a chapbook out, yeah.
Yeah. What's it called?
It's called Affairs Run in the Family.
Okay, and your mother died tragically, if I remember.
if
Well,
what
she-
runs in the family?
Affairs Run in the Family.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, poetry has always been therapeutic, and it's always been about, for myself personally, something that obsesses me or haunts me that I need to work out in my life. And that's why I write, you know. I mean, I think it's different for everybody. But there were certain things in my own life and in stories I would hear from other people about my family that always haunted me. And one was that my grandfather had been he was having an affair, and he was shot by the husband of his lover. And he didn't die. This was in 1936, I believe. But he was paralyzed, partially paralyzed. So my grandmother took him home, and nursed him, and it was very tragic, like an Ethan Frome kind of situation, you know. And it always haunted me. I just always was always thinking about it, and so writing about it, I guess, was in some way a way of dealing with it.
Mhm. You know, interesting. There was a memoirist, Stephanie Castlety, who wrote this memoir about her mother being killed.
Yeah.
And how it haunted her, and how she found resolution through her
Right,
writing.
right.
And she actually,
I can understand that,
yeah.
because sometimes when I've written about something, it's almost like a weight,
Mm.
you know, just falls off me,
Mhm.
you know, in some way.
How about you, Mark? Poetry and writing and.
I've been writing poetry since I was young, and I lost a lot of it because when I was a heroin addict, I
Yeah.
lost it because I was always running from one place to the next. And then I was homeless when I was homeless. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't carry it. I had a big box full of poetry
Oh, gosh.
that just is gone.
Oh,
You know,
that's so
you
sad.
were involved in the many years ago, and it was one of the first magazines I was published in, Boston Poet.
Uh-huh.
Remember that?
Yes, I do.
That was, any comments on that? That little,
I think it was really good. Like Diana Signs started it, and then Deborah Byrne, who I really have. The only thing I can say is I hope I never see her again. But she took it over, and then it just fell apart.
yeah.
And
It's too bad. It was a great
yeah,
little,
Yeah, it was a great little magazine.
yeah.
You can still find it
She sells it on the internet, you know.
on the Amazon.
She
Yeah.
sells it under used books, Deborah Byrne.
She does.
Yeah.
Wasn't she in Spare Change?
She
Mark?
was.
Yeah.
I knew she had a thing in Amazon, but I don't remember.
Yeah, she's a used
The
bookseller.
name she
yeah. I
used,
forget
yeah.
the name she used, but
Yeah.
she's somewhere in Ohio now. or
But
something.
I was gonna. I tried to buy a book,
Mm.
and not realizing that it was her, and because I was gonna have it sent to a friend of mine who's in prison, and she flipped out. She called the prison. She called.
Is this recently?
No, this is a number of years
Yeah.
ago.
I think I remember reading her poem in Spare Change,
But
and I wanted to use it or something, and you said no.
Yeah,
I didn't want to use
she hates me, and my feelings towards
it. Good
her,
enough reason.
my feelings towards her are pretty much the same. You know,
That's all right. She savaged a few of my books on review, so
Yeah.
that's all right.
Oh,
So-
gosh.
But getting to more pleasant subjects.
Yeah, it's,
The
I don't want
the more pleasant subjects. Why don't we read? If you have about actually you have about 14 minutes to read from.
Oh, we have
selections
that much
for
time
beer.
already?
Yeah. yeah.
Okay, do you want to go first?
Oh, but we're having you're having a reading.
Oh, yeah.
August
That's,
23rd.
I'm glad you.
August
23rd?
22nd.
No, it's
August
the
22nd.
22nd. It's a Wednesday.
It's a
at
Wednesday.
the
Tuesday,
Porter's-
is it?
Porter Square Books in Cambridge.
No, you better check.
It's August 22nd, right?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a Wednesday.
August 22nd.
And it's Porter Square Books
At 7 o'clock.
at 7 o'clock.
And I just want to put a plug in for Porter Square Books because
Yes.
they are selling the book and they're an
It's selling
independent-
well, I hear.
Yeah. And so it'd be great if people support their local independent bookstore and also
Yes,
support,
they're
you
great.
know, the anthology. That would be great. Is it 22nd? Is it Wednesday, Mark?
Yeah, it is Wednesday.
I thought so.
Yeah, you were right.
Yeah.
Wednesday.
So, actually, you know what? I think, because I was telling Mark, I think this poem by Marge Piercy is so emblematic of the whole anthology. I think I'll read that.
Okay.
So this is called Lawmaker Destroys Shopping Carts by Marge Piercy. The homeless make him angry. They're in the way. He doesn't find them scenic. How dare they survive on the streets, in parks, in alleys, doorways, and beaches? Making life even making life even more difficult for those at the end of choices is his answer to their problems. Euthanasia would likely please him. Has he never lost a job, run out of money, been robbed or beaten? Never been hungrier than a good steak fixed? He can't understand how people scrape, pick trash to survive, pushing all that remains of their past in a shopping cart. Their lives aren't hard enough, he thinks, planning how to vanish them, taking the little they have left.
Okay.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
Lawmaker Destroys Shopping Carts. And people have probably seen those images of like homeless people putting up tents, you know, and then, you know, the authorities coming and bulldozing.
That's
the-
why they put those things on shopping carts now where you can't wheel them
Can't.
away from the store.
Yeah.
There's a lock when
Yeah.
it gets a certain distance from the store.
Mhm.
Yeah. In San Francisco, they used to do a wagon train of shopping carts and put a big tent over it. Like,
Well, San Francisco is, you know,
That's
they're out
why-
on the
yeah.
streets there, it's so
Yeah.
expensive, and that's happening
Yeah,
here.
A
you
lot
know,
of
the average
places.
rent, for instance, now in Somerville is over
Yeah.
$2,000. I mean,
yeah.
I know.
it's outrageous.
I've seen people shooting up right on the sidewalk in San Francisco.
Mhm.
So,
Recently?
well, like 1997, but
It's not recently.
no, but time flies, I
Yeah.
guess,
Probably
you
still
know.
are places because people don't have places to live, you
Yeah.
know? and-
Yeah. So,
But when you read a,
all right,
Hey,
I'm
fab.
going to read a poem. This is by Linda Larson, who was the editor of Spare Change for at least 5 years. And she has like 3 books out that she
Yeah.
wrote. And she's a fantastic poet.
Yeah,
She's
she is.
an award-winning poet. Nightshade. A night on the streets is full of surprises that don't suit you and gifts you can't return. I find myself on my own at dusk in scenic, drug-ridden Central Square, in need of a bed, a meal, and some wild Irish rose. One ill-kept secret of the streets is the smell of shoes worn 24/7. Whether I am slipping onto a bar stool at Sullivan's Tap, on the arm of a white-haired old gentleman flashing a wad of 20s at me, or kneeling beside the communion rail, the putrid rot of my shoes is a shout-out to predators. This woman is homeless, helpless. Couch surfing is overrated. It starts out fine. I have some money from stemming to share with friends who are getting high. It's going to be a deathly cold night outside the peephole. In the wee hours, there comes a chance for me to bring in some money. Be nice to this guy, my friends tell me. He likes you, and look, he's spending money. He'll get you high. He'll get all of us high. It's not a choice for me to go back to where I was living, unless I want yet another pair of black eyes. I tell everyone I'm fine. They're only shiners. I laugh it off. I'm a raccoon. If I had it in me to kill him, I would. It's 5:30 in the morning. I am out on the street, feeling lucky to be outside in the fresh air. I would feel luckier if I had made it out with my jacket. There's enough change in my pocket for a large coffee regular, enough to buy me a seat in a warm place until the streets fill up and I can stem for more. It's so cold outside, the passers-by on the street won't want to stop and fill the jangle in my cup. My bones ache.
Who wrote that?
Linda Larson.
Linda Lawson.
Yeah, and she was homeless
That's
for
Yeah, I know she was.
a long
I mean,
time.
that's a great
And
book.
but now she's doing really well, really well. She wasn't homeless because of drugs. She actually picked up. This is what happens: is people.
Schizophrenia.
She's and people who are mentally ill become homeless, and then they
Yeah.
pick up drugs. A lot of people think, oh, the drugs come first, but that isn't true.
Mhm.
So, but she's wonderful. She's a close friend with my wife, Mary Esther.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So I'll read the poem I have in here. It's called Colleen, and it's about the woman I was speaking about. So
Beautiful poem.
Yeah, she was 24 when she died of a heroin overdose in September 2013. I know your name now. I know you have no place to sleep tonight. I know you're so anxious you can't come and sit with the other guests, so I bring you a meal to go. Don't give her money, someone says. I give you chicken, rice, and orange. Your beauty is dissolving into night, smack, skag, snow, H, taking you. Heroin is white, but your lips are blue, and blue is seeping into the room where you passed out last week, the room where your head hit the floor, blue dust wafting from the ceiling, oozing from the floorboards. blue like your scarred veins begging for oblivion. At the end of your life, a blue question mark.
Hmm.
I just always remember after she passed away, and I said that there was a wake many people went to in the Cambridge area. I just remember being at that wake and thinking, why did this have to happen? You know, this questioning, even though, you know, I knew, like, why it happened in a sense, it was still like this just real sadness about it, why it had to happen, so.
Do I have time to read a poem?
Yeah, we have
Do you
about
have time?
Okay.
4 minutes.
Okay.
Oh, that's,
4 minutes and
Okay,
some
this
odd
one,
seconds.
this one I wrote. It's when I was selling spare change. It's an observation called "A Couple of Kids." She sits in front of the 7-Eleven, a cup for spare change in her hand. Her eyes are still clear. He comes out of the store. I've seen them together before. She is quite young, maybe 17 years old. He is quite high on heroin, possibly early 20s, heavy-lidded eyes. He scratches his nose. "We're going to get married," he says to me as he hands her a cardboard sign to hold that says, "Broken hungry, please help." "I just don't have the cash for the ring yet," is what he says as he looks at me with pinned eyes. She says, "Maybe we'll go to Florida where the nights are warm when we get the money." He sits next to her, closes his eyes, his head tips forward. She places her arm around his shoulders. "I got me a good one, eh?" she says with a big smile, wide, innocent eyes. I don't know what to say. I want to shake her, wake her up from whatever keeps her asleep. Her eyes are still clear. He hasn't turned her on to the heroin yet. I can still see them, sitting in front of the 7-Eleven in the heart of Central Square. They haven't got to Florida yet. They're still sitting there.
Well, thank you very much for coming on Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer.
Thank
and
you,
I hope-
Doug.
thank you for having us, Doug.
And I think we have 2 minutes. So I think I'll just say that you can buy this book at the Porter Square Books. Where else is it available?
It's also available on Lulu or Amazon.
Amazon.com.
Yeah.
We prefer Lulu because we make more money.
Yes,
Yeah.
and it's actually cheaper on Lulu.
Oh, is it?
Lulu.com,
Oh.
yeah. And
Yeah.
we're gonna get it in